just a brief thing again from last week. Remember to name your compositions. So if this is autobiography, I probably want to name it autobiography would be a good idea. So again, basics here, real basic stuff. This, remember, is your preset size. Generally, like I said, you're pretty safe going with HDV 1080, 29.97, okay? Remember that size, if you just do your little custom drop down, HDV 1080, that's 30 frames a second. It's roughly 1080, okay? Now, 1920 by 1080 is our minimum HD size, right? I just wanted to talk about that a little bit. We got a couple flavors of HD out there these days, okay? You got 1080 HD, you got 2K HD, and you got 4K HD, and now we got 8K HD coming out. You can look up the stats on this. There's no reason these days, especially if you're creating something for the web, to go beyond 2K, okay? You can do it if you want to, but your files are gonna be gigantic. Most people are totally fine with stuff in 1080, especially if it's gonna be geared towards a phone. 1080 is a fine size to work with. Just remember, you can't upscale this afterwards, right? So when you make something, remember to start at high quality if you can and reduce it down afterwards. We'll get into some higher end stuff, but 1080 is fine, okay? The biggest thing is the duration, okay? So remember, this is a 20-second animation. So remember, the frame rates go in hours, minutes, seconds, and frames. So 20 seconds right here. And remember your background color, right? So that's your basics to set up. Again, we went over that last week, so that's pretty good. All right, there's my stuff. So now I want to drop in all my objects, all my stuff. So again, remember, you can go File, Import. You can double click in the bin down here. You can drag and drop stuff. I usually just double click in the bin. Okay, so remember, down here in the gray area, double click in your project bin. And now I've got all the stuff. So I've downloaded a few things. I've got a sound effect, I've got some audio, and I've got some pieces of video in here that I'm going to composite with, okay? And I'm going to show you some different tools. So I'm going to select all of those, right? Now, be kind of careful with this when you're selecting this stuff. I did want to show you something specific that is kind of neat here. I'm not going to do this, but I'm going to show you where it's at. If you've shot some video, okay, and you know what side that video that you've shot is the right size, you don't even have to make a new composition in After Effects. You can start a new project, you can import some video, and you can create a composition based on that piece of footage. It will create the composition at the size of this footage by default. So that way you don't have to worry about the pixel aspect ratio and the frame rate and all that garbage. If you're not sure what your camera shoots in, start a new project and then open File, Import, right? Just do File, Import, click on a video piece, click Create Composition, and it sets everything for you, which is pretty slick, okay? I'm not gonna do that, but you can do that. That's just an option. But I'm gonna go ahead and open all of these. So I'm gonna select them all, Shift click to do multiples, remember. And they all came in without any errors, which is fantastic, okay? Now, right out of the gate, I'm gonna show you some stuff. This is gonna get cluttered real quick, okay? So one of the things you wanna do is create folders, right? This is a basic Adobe thing that's pretty important. I'm gonna create a bin or a folder, and I'm just gonna call this video, right? I usually do video, and I do graphics and audio are the three folders I usually create. And that way you can drop the things in here and things get a little bit more organized. You can do a composition folder. You can always drop it down to see it still, right? Just organization stuff. So stay organized, right? So I've got currently, okay, a composition that I created, my timeline and all my stuff. Okay, so let's go ahead and do some stuff here. I'm gonna throw this video down here for starters on the timeline or on my stage just to show you some stuff. So first things first, this video came in much larger than my 1080 area. Okay, this is obviously a 2K or a 4K video because the aspect ratio is much larger, right? So easy stuff. Remember, just from last week, a recap, you can grab the corner of this and hold down Shift to scale it down if you want. Okay, that's fine. Or remember your transforms. Okay, the basic stuff in After Effects we covered last week. Remember, if you're looking at your layer, and remember you can rename your layer just by hitting Enter. Maybe I'll call this City. Okay. This right here, the triangle next to it is all your transforms, right? This is the smart way to do stuff. Grab your scale and scale it this way and then position it. This is a lot more precise. So I'm gonna get my aspect ratio pretty close here and leave a little bit of overlap and we're good to go. Okay, so let me zoom back into my background here. Now, so again, I'm kind of running out of space here. Let me readjust my window here to There we go. Now I can actually access my stuff down here. So this footage, remember, runs longer. It's 20 seconds. So it's definitely filling up my entire timeline here. But I don't want a full 20 seconds out of this. I'm going to do some masking with it and stuff here in a minute. So just brief stuff. Remember, you can set the in point and out point of your footage, okay? This is actual footage. If I hit spacebar, it plays, right? We got real live footage in here, which we didn't really work with last week. Okay, it's actually playing the footage. If I want this footage to come in at a certain point, say 2 seconds in, okay, drag your playback head, and remember, you can grab the beginning of this and snap it. Boom, there's how you set your in point. Or, remember keyboard shortcuts, Alt-Option, left bracket. Remember, that's how you set your in point is Alt left bracket. And then maybe it'll go to 6 seconds, and I'm gonna end it, and I'm gonna go Alt right bracket. Now, I didn't do that precisely via my time code like I did last week, but remember, you can always set it with your time code, stuff like that, okay? So there, now I trimmed my clip, okay? So it shows up at 2 seconds and ends at 6 seconds, right? So I'm gonna go ahead and layer another piece of video underneath that because I wanna show you some masking and stuff like that. So I've got this other video of some cows. So there's just kind of random footage I grabbed off there. I'm gonna throw that onto my layers, enter to rename it, and I'm gonna drag it underneath, okay, my first layer, right? So let's just say I'm gonna do some compositing with this. I've got, say the cityscape is gonna show up. I'm gonna drag this back to the beginning. Cityscape's gonna show up first, okay? And then the cows are gonna show up after that, and then I'm gonna have some other stuff happening, just kind of random stuff. But the important thing with this, let me go ahead and trim this a little bit more. All right, sometimes, and this is just an effect that I wanna show you guys that's real common, and it's a really important building block and a big piece of After Effects. There are some tools up top we need for this project and for some projects in general. So we didn't get into a whole lot of this stuff yet. Obviously, selection tool up top, right? You got your hand tool and the zoom tool and some other things like rotation tool. You can roll over these and see what they do. Important, one of the most important tools is right up here up top, the rectangle tool. Okay, now in After Effects, this is a pretty big deal. The rectangle tool does two things, okay? And this is also, if you hold down on it, all your basic shapes come up. It's a shape tool. Now, this is used to do a couple of things. It's used to draw basic shapes, right? Like say, for instance, if I wanted, everybody's seen this, a little bar to pop in on the bottom down here that says what city this is, like just a little brief thing, like a little intro piece, graphic that rolls over the top, okay? You can use this shape tool to do that. You select the shape tool. Now this is kind of important though. Before you draw anything, this is the confusing part with this tool, you have to deselect your layers, okay? Right down here, I've got this city layer selected. To use the shape tool properly, you gotta deselect your layers. You click in the gray area down here once, then you click your shape tool, and notice this stuff lights up, okay? This stuff doesn't. Your fill color, right? I've got a pretty obnoxious fill color and a stroke chosen on this, so you can see it on the monitor. If you've got your layer selected, none of that stuff shows up, okay? It's a different tool. It's literally a different tool, whether you've got the layer selected or whether you don't have it selected. Okay, so I'm gonna show you the difference here because this is a big deal. I'm gonna draw out with my rectangle tool. Let me zoom out a little bit. Again, rectangle selected, fill color selected, layers are deselected, all right? Draw out my shape, okay? Boom. So now my shape pops on screen. Now this shape layer, it's its own independent layer right here. And I can, again, set like my in point and my out point. I'm gonna drag this back because I'm just gonna have this little square slide in and show the name of the city, right? I'm just gonna kind of show you some little tricks with that, okay? So now the shape layer is on screen, we can animate this just like I would anything else. You don't have to make shapes inside other programs. You can just make them inside here, and they're vector, which is great. So how do you animate it? Same way you would anything else. You got transforms, right? So I can go back to the beginning, rewind, set my position, move this thing, grab my x-axis. Again, this is x-axis and y-axis, right? Drag it off screen, move it in a little bit, drag it on screen, and blammo, I got my animation, right? So rewind, test it. Okay, hit space bar, whoop, little square pops in. And then when it's off screen, when I want it to go off screen, remember from last week, we can actually copy and paste these. So if I want this thing to roll on screen, okay, it's gonna stay there for a second, and then it's gonna roll off screen at the end, maybe at 4 seconds, okay? All you do roll over your keyframes. Again, make sure your selection tool is grabbed up top here. Select your keyframes, copy them. Make sure your playback head is where you want this thing to end up. Paste, right? And now, this is pretty slick. Check this out. It rolls on screen. Now it rolls back off though, see? Now what's happening here? I copied and pasted my keyframes, right? So it comes on screen at point A, starts off screen at point A, rolls on screen at point B, and what it's trying to do is go all the way, since I copied and pasted my keyframes, back to point A, right? Simple though, check this out. All you gotta do is switch these two, right? Grab this keyframe, since it's off-screen keyframe, move it to the end. I just swapped them, right? And now, check it out, pretty slick. Object comes on screen, stays for a minute, hits that keyframe, pops right back off, right? That's the trick in After Effects, is copying and pasting keyframes like I was saying. So I've got a moving element right here, pretty easy, okay? Now, I'm gonna show you also, I'm gonna come back to this piece in a minute though, okay? I wanna show you the second thing. I'm gonna collapse some stuff here just to kind of make my workspace a little cleaner. I'm gonna show you the second way this tool works, which is really the more important way, okay? In addition to this being a shape tool, okay, if I have my triangle or my rectangle selected, in addition to drawing shapes, I am going to select my city layer, okay? I'm gonna select this layer, and now I'm gonna click my rectangle tool. And now what the tool does, now that a video layer is selected, okay, a graphics layer of some kind is selected, this will draw a mask, okay? Think back to Photoshop, what masks do when you draw stuff. Mask, I'm drawing this on the city layer, this overview, like this drone shot of the city. I'm drawing a rectangle on the city layer, and notice what it does, okay? Now I'm gonna go back to my selection tool to show you some stuff. This yellow mask, okay, it is masking off a portion of my footage. This works in the opposite way that it does in Photoshop. It's kind of annoying, but this is the way it goes. When you draw a mask on top of something, it reveals that object and hides the rest of it. Now, why the hell would you want to do that? What's the point of that? Because we can animate that stuff, right? You guys have seen this effect in a lot of stuff. We can animate this mask. This is pretty slick. Once I've drawn it, I can then select it, okay, by double clicking it, okay? Now, if you just single click it, I'm gonna go back to my selection tool, deselect something, single click this mask. If you single click the mask, you can move it around, okay? But you can accidentally move the individual points of this mask, okay? Each point of this mask is a keyframeable thing, okay? So be careful with that. If you wanna move the whole mask, you double click it, right? Oops, now, something happened here. This is tricky stuff in After Effects. Be careful with this. And I was hoping this function would pop up. Now, I double clicked in the center of my mask instead of the edge of my mask. What this did, and this is a function in After Effects you haven't seen yet. You have the ability in After Effects, look up top here in your interface, the ability to see an individual layer and edit that individual layer, okay? This is just this single city layer. I can edit this layer individually right here if I want to. That's not what I want to do, okay? Anytime you double click it and it says layer and not composition, you generally want to close that window. Try to only work in your composition window. Individual layer windows we'll get to later. We don't really need those yet. But just keep an eye. You want to be in your composition window. I'm going to close this, okay? This is my comp window. So grab your mask and double click the edge of the mask. Notice now free transform controls show up on this thing, and I can move the whole mask around, okay? So let me show you why would you even want to do this? Because it's an effect, okay? So I'm going to start this mask off screen, and you guys have all seen this effect at some point. This mask is now off screen. Okay, I just drug it over here, and I'm going to rewind my playback head so that this thing is going to roll in, and I'm going to have some masking going on in the background as kind of cool little effects on this thing. So I'm going to rewind, go over to my layer over here. Again, you can drop it down if you need to, drop down your transforms. And now notice there is a mask added on top of here, okay? This mask is this yellow thing that I've drawn over the top of my footage. It's a mask layer. This mask, I can do all kinds of different stuff with, okay? These are transforms for my mask. One of those is my mask path, okay? Mask path is its position, okay? So I'm gonna click the keyframer, which remember drops a keyframe on my timeline to start the mask off screen. And then I'm gonna go in, let's say 1 second in roughly, okay? I'm about 1 second in. And I'm gonna grab this mask by double clicking it. Remember to double click the edge of the mask, and I'm gonna move it across screen, okay? Now, I'm gonna rewind and show you what that does, right? So deselect. I'm gonna click somewhere else on my screen just so I don't have my mask selected. Rewind and play. Check that out, right? That is a real common effect where you see one piece of video running over the top of another piece of video, right? And now, the mask, remember, you can do these in any shape you want, right? So I can even create little like micro transitions and stuff like that using these masks. These are really slick. So say, for instance, my mask, I only want this to run halfway through, and then this mask is gonna transition into my full screen, okay? I'm gonna delete the second keyframe, and I'm gonna do something different with it. So just highlight your keyframe, delete it, right? I'm gonna do something a little different. I'm gonna have it roll in. Again, here's my mask, rewind, make sure my mask layer is selected, double click it, okay? Set right here, maybe halfway through that 1 second mark. I'm gonna have it roll into screen. Remember to double click it, like I said, right here, okay? So it rolls into screen, and then what it's gonna do at the full 1 second, maybe at 2 seconds in, I'll make it a little longer. I'm gonna transform some of my other stuff down here, okay? So what I wanna do at this middle keyframe, I'm going to plug in some other things. Mask feather, opacity, expansion, just to show you what they do, okay? So at 2 seconds in, let me just show you what each one of these does. Mask path is what moves the thing, right? That's recording my motion on my mask. So again, if I want this thing to move, I can just move my mask and it'll automatically record that. Or feather, check this out, this is pretty cool. You can feather out your mask to bleed out the edges, okay? So maybe I crank that feather way up on this thing, and now this piece of video just fades into the other video, which is pretty interesting. It creates kind of an overlay effect. Check this out. Spacebar, boom, and the edge of that thing just bleeds out. So you can see that video overlaid over the top the entire time. That's a pretty cool effect. Maybe that's something I would want to do. I'm gonna Control Z back. There's also mask. I'm gonna get rid of that feather, just delete it. Mask opacity. So I could have the mask itself fade out, right? Maybe that thing just comes on screen and then fades out as it goes. So you can actually fade out literally the entire layer using the opacity there. Or we can do mask expansion, which is pretty cool. This literally expands out the mask wider, so I've got a transition from one piece of footage to another. Maybe I'm talking about the cows in this shot, and then the city rolls in for the next shot, and blam, that transitions into my next piece. So as you can see, masking, and we're gonna do a lot with masking. Masking is really where most of your cool video effects come from, okay? It's literally about compositing one piece of footage or one effect, one layer, one graphic on top of another, and revealing those in clever ways. That's like how most of the motion graphics you see on TV are done. This is an intro spot for video right out of the gate. I've got, can put the name of the city on here, which I'm gonna do in a minute, and I'm transitioned from one clip into another. Pretty slick. All right, so that's masking. Masking and shapes. Shapes and masking are both really, really important tools that are pretty simple to work with. The audio, I haven't even put in yet. This is something, I'm just gonna go ahead and drag this on the timeline down here. Audio is really easy to work with. Like, now this is gonna sound kind of stupid when I put this in here, but that's all right. Maybe I'm gonna just drop this audio piece, this sound effect right here. This is a boing sound effect. Rewind and play, okay? Now, notice there's a huge lag there, okay? Sometimes After Effects, it's a pretty horrible effect. Sometimes After Effects is a little bit laggy. Now, your computer, depending on how you're running this, say you're running this on a laptop or something, it might not even play your audio. The only way, if you really, really want to hear your audio and play it in more of a real time, there's a preview button over here. This is actually worth looking at. The preview window over here has a lot of good stuff in it. Oops, I can double click that. Let me do reset to default. Preview window, drop that down. Your preview window, if you rewind in your preview window and hit play, if it's not playing your audio, and it's not playing the whole thing all the way through, it's stuttering and freaking out, click this little button right here, okay? This caches your file before playback. Now, what does that mean, okay? Caching is something that's kind of an important deal. right? I'm gonna rewind this and go back. If you have a computer that's not so great, what this will do will cache it. It creates a pre-rendered, a very, very low quality preview render of your animation and waits, it buffers, and then it plays it back to you in real time so you can actually see what the thing looks like. If you have a really not so great computer, this is an awesome way of actually seeing what your animation looks like. So you just hit cache before playback, rewind, and play. Make sure your audio is turned on if you want to hear it. Sometimes by default, this is turned off. You can turn it up to full screen if you want. This is a nice little palette, just for playing stuff back. So I'm gonna go ahead and throw in my my little other audio effect here underneath the sound effect. Okay, just to show you that you can trim audio the way you would anything else. If you want to trim a piece of audio, Option, and then bracket, same way, okay? You can trim your audio the way you trim video. This is just a piece of music I've got in here. I'm gonna hit play. A little more interesting with the music. The audio effect, the sound effect's pretty terrible, but I'm gonna leave it in there just to illustrate. All right, it's probably hugely loud. I'm gonna quit playing that. So that's the idea. So you can just drop effects in here, and these things, if you notice, also have keyframers on them, right? If this is way too loud, which it is, okay, the sound effect itself is way too loud. I'm getting sick of it. So I'm gonna click that sound effect, drop down the audio keyframer, and drop. Now, notice I haven't turned on the keyframe. I want the whole thing to be more quiet. Just pull down your audio levels, right? Just a little bit. Now, decibels, it goes in decibels. The only way to tell if this how this is just pull it down a little bit or up a little bit and play it again to see if it's any good. Still too loud, turning it down. See, there you go. Same thing with this. Maybe I'll crank this down to -13 or 14 as well. There we go. A little more palatable, right? So that's the thing. Very easy to control this. You can keyframe it. If you want it to start off quiet, okay, I'm gonna have keyframe dropped, starts off pretty darn quiet. Let's take it down to like -80, which you won't be able to hear anything. I can go in a second or two, maybe till this purple guy comes in, and then I can crank the audio back up to my -13 decibels or wherever it was. And now we've got an audio ramp. So rewind and play. See how that audio ramps up as it comes in? It doesn't just start automatically. So pretty simple. Everything, as you see in After Effects, is driven by these keyframes. It's basically the same thing, okay? So I just wanted to show you that easy. It's really easy to work with audio. Look, if you want to learn to edit audio a little more, we can get into audio like Adobe Audition, which is a little bit more fluid. We'll probably work with that a little bit later. But After Effects only gives you a couple options with audio. You basically only get to turn it up and down. So it's meant for your audio to be kind of finished by the time you get it in here. Anyway. So last thing I want to show you. So that's quite a bit of stuff, but it'll give you a lot of tools to work with, the masking and the shapes and all that other stuff. Gives you a lot to work with your autobiography. I want you to get in there and play with this. Something else I'm going to cut you guys loose on for this project. There's a whole nother palette over here in the right-hand side that's really, really cool. This is the whole point of After Effects, okay, in my opinion. It's like moving Photoshop. It's like motion Photoshop. You know in Photoshop you got filters, right? All the cool filters you have. These are all of your effects in After Effects. These are really cool. There's all kinds of presets. We're going to get into these a lot, real heavy. Don't worry about a lot of them. You can play with them if you want. Some of them are very confusing. But there's some really cool stuff in the animation presets. Okay, these are preset animations that you can use to make your stuff look better right out of the gate. These are kind of tricks. You can download presets too. That's one of the tricks in After Effects. Most After Effects people don't actually know how to use After Effects. They just download presets. Okay, so let me show you. The text ones for this project are fantastic. Okay, now let me just plug in. Remember last week we went over the text tool. So select your text tool, and maybe I will click and drag to make a text box, and I'm going to put. Right, I'm gonna put city name here. All right, and this is gonna be, okay, I'm just drag that to the top. I'm gonna select it. I'm gonna go to my character palette, you know, the basics that we would do with any font. Okay, make it nice and large. Okay, so city name here. Maybe that's just all I'm gonna do for the text on this. I'm pre-compositing, I'll put the name of the city in afterwards, right? Okay, so I've typed out my text. I've determined how long it needs to be on screen. Remember, you got to cut it first. So I don't want it to, I don't want my text to be on screen the whole time. I want it to come in when my purple block comes in. So let me animate that real quick. Drop down my transforms, okay? Set my position off screen. And then as this thing rolls in, I can then go ahead and set my position here, right? Or I could have just copied and pasted the keyframes off the last one, but that's okay. I just want to show you how to do it again. So remember, that's how you get your animated sequence to work. Probes a little bit further. I kind of botched that a little bit, no big deal. Grab your keyframe and drag it. That's the nice thing is you screw up, you just move your keyframe till the right spot. So now this rolls in at the same time, right? That's one kind of animation. Maybe that's fine. But let me go ahead and crack into the effects and presets. Text. Say if I wanted this thing to do something crazy whenever it rolls in. Maybe I want it to do, I don't know, something organic, like boil, which is pretty crazy. I can make the text look like it's boiling. Grab this preset, drag and drop either on the text itself or on the layer. The layer is probably a little bit safer to do that. Now, before I do this, I'm not actually going to do this yet. I'm going to let go of this and just drop it back in here. Make sure you put, now some of these are pretty random, I'm going to warn you. Some of these are dependent on where the playback head is placed. Some are not, okay? Some you can't really even change. But I'm gonna just make this one right here. As soon as this city name rolls in, I'm gonna make it boil, okay? So drag and drop, boom. Now, what did this do? Rewind, I'm gonna hit space bar. Check that out. That was pretty fast, okay, this effect. But if we hit play, look at that, okay? That's a pretty interesting effect, right? So, and that was with no work whatsoever. It was just a drag and drop. This stuff looks like it boils up from the bottom and it automatically kind of pops out of existence. That's a preset effect. There are hundreds of these things in here, right? I want you guys to go through them. Go through these text effects. That's really what you probably should spend a lot of the time doing on this exercise. Set up your stuff, do your storyboards, but I want you to go through these effects. I want you to work through these and just try some of these out. They're really cool. And we can get into modifying these later and stuff, but really what they do is they actually drop a whole set of stuff, if you notice, onto your timeline. Check this out. A whole bunch of animation stuff got plugged in here automatically that we can go in and adjust later. You won't want to, but you can, okay? So those presets literally just drop animation on your timeline, basically where you want it. And then we're done. So that's the kind of the thing. I want you guys to set up your 20-second autobiography, make it, interesting and get some graphics rolling around in there, but really use these presets to do some fun stuff with it. That's kind of the plan here. And then when you're done, remember the rendering stuff. I'm gonna go back through the rendering again. Select your palette down here, okay? Composition, right? Add the render queue is one way to do it, or add the media encoder queue. Remember, media encoder is really the way you'd rather do it. So I'm gonna go ahead and do add the media encoder queue, and we're gonna wait for that to start up, and then I'll render it out as an H.264, okay? So just kind of as media encoder starts up, just kind of recap. The lesson this week mostly, so when things not to forget, okay, when you're working in this stuff. Don't forget the basics, right? Don't forget your principles of animation when you're working in this stuff. All of those things you should be mindful of that when you're storyboarding and scripting. How are you going to apply squash and stretch? How are you going to apply staging and timing and stuff like that? All of that leads to the animation being interesting, right? So remember, while you're setting this stuff up, try to consciously consider those things because it will lead to a better animation, okay? Okay, so media encoder popped up a little faster than I thought. Remember in here, you just gotta set a couple of things. Just drop this down and choose H.264. Remember, that's your main setting. Wherever this is going to be deployed at, and again, this depends on where you want to release it. Again, YouTube 1080, again, if I had a smaller, I would recommend that you use, cancel on that you use the YouTube, still too big. Okay, hold on a minute. My screen sharing thing's right in the way of what I want to click. Darn it, I keep clicking the wrong thing here. There we go, drop down. Oh, it's still, the screen, hide. Oh, shoot, okay. Let me go back into my media encoder queue. Everything's always in the way when I'm trying to do things on this computer, which is just lots of fun. Media encoder is back. Okay, now we can see it. So, YouTube 1080, that's what I would choose. remember I was saying that these things create better streams based on where you release these things. If my destination would be YouTube, I would want to choose YouTube as my destination on this. If it's 2K, I want to do it in 4K or 1080, whatever output you want. But remember, if you started in 1080, it's not going to upscale to 4K, right? If you started in 4K, you can always downscale it to 1080, but you can't upscale it. So always remember, you can't upscale resolutions and have it look any good. That's just a basic video fact. And then choose where it's going to go. Remember, always render this thing. Oh, just a quick note, something that I was saying from last week as well. Let's do motion graphics week 4 and then renders. I was saying last week, just something on renders, and I'm just going to go ahead and render this thing while I talk. So a couple notes. Remember I was saying last week, be careful when you render this thing because Adobe doesn't care how big your hard drive is, right? You really would like to get an external drive and keep all of this stuff on a big couple terabyte external drive so you don't kill your computer. One thing with rendering, a brief note. If you're working on an external hard drive, right, and your files are on your external hard drive and you're rendering to that external hard drive, I would recommend you render to your desktop first, okay? Comparative analysis on this. Think about this. This is just a computer hardware thing. If you're rendering to an external device, it has to work twice. The computer has to work twice as hard. It has to render the file, and then it has to transmit that file via USB to that hard drive, and that's an extra step, right? If you render it to your desktop and then transfer it over to your external hard drive after you're done, it renders much faster. Okay, so that's something to keep in mind is your render speeds will be much quicker. I mean, it depends on your hardware and what kind of hard drive you get, but it's usually faster if you render using desktop and not the external hard drive and drag it over later, okay? And always test your render. Here's my render, 29 megabytes because it's compressed, not so bad. I'm gonna open it up and I'm gonna hit play. And there we go, here's our horrible animation. But again, you can kind of see it's got the makings of something that's kind of interesting, right? And that's kind of the idea.